Hello everybody and welcome to yet another patch notes review. This time around it's going to be for patch 0.75, and of course, as you guys can see here, it's going to be the one where Theodore is going to be released. But before we talk about Theodore, we still have quite a lot of things to talk about before that happens, so let's go on to our first topic here. The first one is going to be the Battle Pass, of course. And the Battle Pass normally costs 1550 MP as you can see here, but it's going to be on sale for the first 2 weeks that it's going to be available, so pick it up when you can. And with the Battle Pass, you're going to get 3 big skins. The first one is going to be Sweet Beast Hyunwoo, as you can see here. The second one is going to be the Yuki skin, as you can see here. And the last one is going to be the Lead Island skin, as you can see here as well. So of course, the Battle Pass, just as before, you're just going to have to grind the levels through it by playing the game. And you can get all the rewards by either paying for it, of course, or you can get the free ones by not paying for it as well. For the next part, we're going to talk about the Season 8 start as well as the Season 7 ranked rewards here. Of course, with this patch, Season 8 is going to officially begin, and Season 7 ranked rewards will be sent out. The list of the rewards are going to be listed right here, but for Gold and higher in any game mode, you do get the Cadet Mai skin, and a couple of other rewards that you can get for hitting a certain threshold for the rank above Gold, or even Platinum right there. And if you manage to get a certain requirement, you're going to be able to get the Immortal border as well as the icon as well. For all the other ranks, you still do get each borders as well as the profile icons, so you can be happy about those if you got those ranks as well. Now, for the next part, we're going to talk about a couple of the changes that came through for the battle zones here. Now, it is of course the patch right after preseason, so there's a lot of things that had to be figured out for the battle zones, and it seems like at least during 0.75 there's going to be a couple of things that are going to be changing here, and I wanted to make some key points known. And the first one is going to be the fact that the removal of battle zone heal packs are going to come through in 0.75, so you can't just go on top of those heal packs and heal your way all the way to victory. You will have to try fighting it out with the amount of health that you have remaining after each and every fight, unless you somehow take the time to rest up. Another big point is the fact that you can't find legendary equipment on Battlezone corpses because the distribution of these legendary equipment was a little bit too much. So if you kill somebody inside of a Battlezone and they already had a legendary equipment, you will not be able to take it from them and equip them for yourself. A couple of other things here. Character elimination as well as the shuttle explosion improvements. Just a couple of things that makes it so that you don't always have to be camping these shuttle zones, since that was a big thing that was happening during the preseason. They're optimizing a little bit for players who are deciding to fight it out a little bit earlier on in the battle zone and reducing the amount that the stabilizer being dropped from the shuttle is going to really give you to begin with. And the same thing for the shuttle as well, where we're going to have a little bit of a change in regards to how some characters are going to be able to interact with the shuttle. As you can see here, a couple of big changes. One mainly being the fact that shuttles are going to have a lot more max HP, but for characters who deal damage using their skills, they're going to be able to do a lot more damage, just a couple of seconds to make sure that they have a chance to be able to knock down these compared to basic attack characters. Although there will be some limitations for all characters across the board, since it was a little bit too easy for them to gain additional utilities and stacks or something like that for their character. As you can see here during 0.75, Celine is going to be changed so that she can't gain some additional stacks on her skills. Yan will also be losing the opportunity to do that. Aiden, Zahir, and Tazia. So very important when it comes to the game mechanics, but very needed since a lot of these characters got free stacks off of the shuttle since it was pretty tanky, and now they won't be able to do that anymore so freely. Another thing that I want to talk about here is the next section where we're going to be talking about the legendary equipment destruction function. So if you find a random legendary item that you are not able to use for yourself, you can destroy it and gain additional credits. Now, it's going to be very similar to crafting an item where you're going to have to stand still for 6 seconds, but now you can actually make use of some of the legendary items that you won't be able to use any longer instead of just dropping it somewhere or putting it in a corpse of an animal. So cool things happening in that regards. Next up, just a quick change onto an augment, but a pretty significant one regardless. Vampiric Bloodline getting hit very hard in 0.75. Omni Siphon per stack is going to decrease by 0.9, but because of the fact that Omni-Siphon for Vampiric can actually stack up to 5 times, in total you are losing 4.5% overall Omni-Siphon. So a very big hit to characters who want to use Vampiric Bloodline, and of course in general Vampiric has been getting hit pretty consistently over the course of time, but this is a very, very big hit that even I'm a little bit worried about for some of our Vampiric Bloodline users. Now, before we start talking a little bit about characters, well, technically Leon is one of the characters, so we'll talk about him here real fast. He is going to be getting a new weapon during 0.75. He's going to be using Tonfa alongside the gloves that he originally had, and you can see a lot of his stats right here as well. So I'm not going to go too far in depth when it comes to Leon as of right now, since I'm not exactly sure what the ramifications of adding this weapon onto his kit is going to be like, but maybe we'll figure it out during 0.75, and if anything, I'll talk a little bit more about it in a future video, because I feel like when it comes to new weapons for characters, you definitely have to experience it before you can start giving a lot of thoughts about it. So we'll see what happens with this character in the upcoming time that we do have for 0.75. And alongside Leon, we're going to start talking about some of the character changes here. For the small ones, I'll just try to kind of breeze past as soon as I can, unless it's a pretty big change in my personal opinion. So let's get started off with Nadine. Crossbow getting a little bit of basic attack amp. Not exactly the best, since crossbow has been a little bit iffy, so we'll continue moving on. A pretty big change, I would have to say, for Tia. The red and yellow combination, the one that does damage over time, is going to get a little bit of amplification scaling buff over on the damage side, but for the red and blue combination, for the movement speed increase afterwards when you proc it, it is going to be a little bit nerfed. So a little bit more damage, a little bit less utility is the simple way that you can think of this change for Tia. Lee Dailin is going to be getting nerfed a little bit here as well to attack power down. Hasetsu on Rio, just a little bit of armor penetration that you do get from that passive, going to be going down as well. Adela getting a pretty big buff here. The Night Fork damage is going to be buffed by 15%, but I've been talking to some of our Korean players here. This is actually a pretty big buff to Adela, even though you might think it's only 15%, but there's a lot of ways that Adela's kind of kit synchronizes with a different part of her kit. So this 15% here is going to be a lot more beneficial to players who can make sure that this Night Fork damage can land multiple times throughout their combinations. And this buff here is a little bit troublesome for me when it comes down to it. I'm a little bit worried about how strong Adela might be in this patch, but we'll see how that goes when the patch actually hits, of course. A big hit to Yan during 0.75 as well. All of his capabilities of jumping through walls has been removed. So Knee Strike, the leaping Knee Strike, which is the second proc, can no longer go over walls. And Bob and Weave also cannot go over walls. So a huge hit to the mobility of Yan, but a really big sigh of relief for a lot of characters who've been getting chased by Yans, especially when Tonfa is running 35% cooldown and you can't do anything about it. A good change, in my personal opinion, that really limits how far Yan can go in regards to chasing people down. But for Yankee players, of course, they're not really going to be happy about this one, which, in my personal opinion, is completely fine by me. Next up is going to be Ekion. Just a little bit of buffs because he ended up losing all of his armor penetration scaling that he had in 0.74. They're going to be making it up just a little bit on the Death Adder as well as the Black Mamba side. Of course, nothing on the side of Sidewinder, as you can see, but just a small buff over onto Ekion for those two specific weapons. Yuki receiving a pretty similar nerf onto Dailin, just to attack power down. Irem will be receiving very significant nerfs as well as significant buffs as well. So a little bit more on the damaging side, more so than so much utility side. And that, in my opinion, is very nice. First of all, we're going to talk about Bouncy Ball. Just a little bit of a damage buff, of course, 5%, not too massive. But the big thing that I wanted to talk about is going to be the root compared to the stun when you get hit by Cat Punch as soon as you're hit with the Cat Bell mark. A big thing that allows at least players to have a little bit of retaliation when you are getting punched by the cat during the duration of that skill. So a cool thing there. A little bit less utility on Hissy Fit since you are going to get less cooldown reduction when you hit some of these skills. And for Pet Me, you're going to do a little bit more damage if you hit that as well. Jenny, just a little bit of nerf to the late game scaling for the basic attack amp version. So of course that means crits. Kathy is going to be receiving a little bit of a buff for the dual sword version since Dagger has been doing a bit better in my personal opinion as well for Kathy. Chloe getting a little bit of scaling nerfs as well for the late game. Kiara getting an ult cooldown buff is going to be pretty huge for Kiara's, of course, even in the early stages. Because if you do execute something, you do get even lower cooldown as well. So a pretty big buff to Kiara in the early stages of the game there. Tazia getting a little bit nerfed since Paradiso, her ultimate is a very, very good damaging skill when you do manage to land it, which Tazia does have a lot of utilities to make sure that it lands. So a little bit of a nerf. 10% in the skill amplification scaling is completely fine, at least in my books. Felix will be getting a little bit of a buff here when it comes to the scaling aspect of this character. I feel like this statement right here is definitely true. There are still some players who do like playing Felix, but he genuinely feels like he's been slightly lacking, so I do like this change. Piolo also getting a little bit nerfed, and thank goodness this has finally been happening because Piolo has been running amok in the game at the moment. And the main reason why is because of his E, and that is exactly where they are going to hit him. Lower on the base damage, and that's going to hurt his damage over the course of time because he can rotate through his cooldowns a lot faster. But the big part that I really wanted to talk about is the airborne duration. Really felt like you had no answers once you got hit by Piolo because the E, the first part, stalled throw, already knocks you back, which kind of forces you into the situation where you're going to be hit by the second part if you do get hit by the first one. So reducing the airborne duration is going to allow you to have at least a little bit more time to counterattack after Piolo finishes his main combo. Heart is also going to be getting a little bit of a nerf here, which is slightly surprising in my books, but it is happening, so I guess cool, at least in there. And the next section, let's go over on to the weapons. We'll just kind of quickly go through these since most of these are just small stat changes, and I'll kind of talk about the big ones. So Imperial Silk Gloves, so there's a little bit of a change. Glock also getting a reduced attack range. Eclipse also getting a nerf. Big thing is going to be for shurikens. Now Venom Dart is going to be a little bit changed here because Venom Dart is now going to be built into Frost Venom Dart, which is now going to be a legendary instead of an epic that builds up into Petal Torrent. And Petal Torrent is going to change into Onyx Dagger and the Tree of Life, and this item now makes a lot more sense in regards to what In Full Bloom wants to do. So much more opportunities to pop it since the cooldown is going to be buffed here, and you do also get the attack speed instead of the skill amplification that you got alongside of that weapon, although you're going to get a little bit of a reduced amount of attack power. So this weapon in general makes a lot more sense, in my opinion, as to what it wants to do. However, Frost Venom Dart is going to be changed into a legendary weapon that has Lich's Grasp, and from the looks of it right now, stats are going to be pretty similar, so no need to worry about that one. Death Rune a little bit nerfed, still a very strong item for Shuriken characters, and Suitor Sana will now be changing into a bit more of an effective ranged character style for auto attackers, since you are going to be getting the basic attack range buff on side of the amount of attack power that you do have. A little bit of a buff to Levitine. So for Yuki, basically the nerf doesn't matter if you do play the two-handed sword and get the Levitine. Gauss rifle coming alongside Theodore. Effectively, you can speak of it like that. And just another sniper rifle that allows you to go for an early game weapon with the regular skill amp and the scaling aspect with the skill amp per level. Polaris going to be hit a little bit. Tac also going to be buffed a little bit here as well. Gentian Silvergun is going to be nerfed a little bit here as well as buffed in the attack power. A new whip, Sword of Scale, is going to be for skill amp as well as skill amp scaling. But it also has a little bit of healing reduction. So just a little bit more variety in regards to what kind of legendaries you're able to go for whip instead of only being forced into, of course, Uranos, which is very specific in what it wants to do, as well as the Bloody Ninetails, which is a blood sample, which is very difficult to get. So this time around, it's going to be a meteorite transition for the whip that you have easy access to in the earlier stages of the game. Now, the changes for throw, I'm not exactly sure how monumental this is going to be since I don't really play throw characters too often, but there's a lot of changes in regards to the build paths, which I know a lot of people haven't really been too happy about since it forces them to completely remake their builds. But I feel like once those builds are remade, it should be fine for the most part. Although the one big thing that I wanted to talk about here is going to be the Grenade of Antioch. That does go from a legendary to, an epic to a legendary, where, in my personal opinion, Grenade of Antioch has genuinely should have been, if anything, should be there. You know, it's been a long time since Grenade of Antioch has been there, basically swapping places with David Sling, and it's been a long time coming. Now, this weapon is going to be buffed a little bit, of course, now that it is going to be a legendary. It's going to be a grenade as well as the Tree of Life, gaining a little bit of attack power as well as the additional attack speed. So, the Olden King will now rise again. Grenade of Antioch legendary and David Sling back to an epic. A little bit of a nerf over onto the Fireball, of course, just a little bit of skill amp nerf over on the scaling for Magnetic Midnight, and Dyadic Prism will be getting hit a little bit as well. VF Prosthetics, I talked about how Alpha Sidewinder didn't really get any buffs, at least when it came down to the character in and of itself, but here we're going to be a little bit of a buff. Max HP going to be going from 35 to 55 with the Swift Strides. Next up is going to be the armor section. Again, similar to the weapons, I'm just going to go through some of these real quick. Just a couple of buffs over onto the chest pieces, and Mithril in general has been hit overall, so we'll see that pretty commonly throughout the board. Mithril armor is going to be nerfed in regards to the movement speed. Mithril helm very similar over on the head side alongside a slight buff to Vigilante. Arms across the board has been relatively buffed, in my opinion. Now, Vital Sign Sensor might seem like a nerf because numerically you do see a nerf, but it's very much easier to build now that you don't need to build all the way up into the motor, so requires one less scrap metal compared to before. Plasma Arc also being buffed here. Again, Mithril Shield being nerfed in regards to the movement speed, and everything else just kind of getting buffed alongside of it as well. Big things over onto Bracelet of Scotty as well as Prominence. Now, you don't need to build all the way up into a Crimson Bracelet. It's just going to be a bracelet. Now, for the legs, a change in regards to Glacier Crampons as well as Clogs, if you want to talk about it like that, where Clogs are going to get a little bit of a recipe change where it's going to be a pickaxe instead of a snare. I've seen some funny memes about this where you just pretty much strap a branch over onto a pickaxe and you wear it on your shoe, but that is going to be the new recipe for Clogs, and Glacier Crampons now will be an epic instead of a rare. And changing from the scrap metal, it's going to be a barbed wire as well as a clog. So if you do want to start out with Headhunter, or Head Starter, yeah, there we go. That is the augment that I'm thinking about, Head Starter. You can use the clogs from there to build up into a Glacier Crampons for very easy access over onto boots. And you do get a little bit of buff to the armor penetration as well. Jolly Roger is going to be nerfed here. 2 attack power going down. Buccaneer Doubloon will be getting buffed. Hawkeye getting removed on the skill app. Not exactly sure why that was there to begin with. And Mithril Quiver also getting nerfed alongside all of its other Mithril counterparts. Now then, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the bug fixes and improvements that I wanted to mention. Just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. First of all is going to be Pedal Torrent. This is not going to be too long of a section because there's 2 things that I wanted to talk about. One, Pedal Torrent no longer will activate from wild animals. And that was the effect that I was talking about earlier, where now that Pedal Torrent makes a lot more sense, being able to fix something like this is going to be absolutely monumental for characters who really want to be farming constantly throughout the game. And the other one is going to be this one right here. Now, if anyone has been playing Eternal Return for quite a bit, you will know that the names have been hidden. So you get test subjects in every single game, even though you didn't opt for it. And at least for this one, does seem like it's going to be fixed for the custom games. Not exactly sure if it's going to be fixed for the regular game, but you can at least hope that this fix actually comes through and we'll be able to see all of our character names and their player names for the custom games. Now then, the next section I'm going to quickly talk about is going to be for Theodore. Now, of course, I should have probably mentioned him in the earlier part, but I kind of want to talk about him at the end of the video because there's a lot of things about Theodore that I think is really nice when it comes down to the gameplay style. Now, first, His passive just pretty much lets you become invisible after you exit a bush and gain a little bit of additional movement speed as well as a shield. And the big part about this is also the fact that he cannot gain additional HP from his equipment. Instead, he converts it to attack speed instead. And that really comes through because a lot of his abilities actually affect his auto attacks as well. Remember, he does run sniper rifle, so his auto attack speed not going to be absolutely massive, but with his kit, he should be able to get enough from all of that. Energy cannon, basically you charge up your beam as long as possible, and then you just proc it, dealing damage to enemies in the line or healing allies in that as well. Now, if you hit an enemy, then you will be able to get a little bit of extra range on your next basic attack. And there's a little bit of an interaction that you can do with your W as well, as you can see in this GIF as soon as it comes up. Right there, you shoot it into the shield and then it blasts right back, and it also deals a little bit extra damage as well. Going over onto the power screen, we saw the interaction just now with his Q, but now the power screen in and of itself. If you shoot an auto attack through the shield, it's going to disperse. If you use your E through the shield, it's also going to disperse. So a very good utility focused skill when it comes down to it for Theodore that you do probably want to make use of as much as possible. Now his E Spark Nade is a pretty important skill here as well, because you're just going to throw a grenade and you're going to be able to auto attack that character because of their mark. Now if you do pop the mark by giving them an auto attack or hitting them with a skill, you're going to root them for a couple of seconds, and that is a very big part about Theodore to keep himself sustainable, as well as maybe even chasing people down with his teammate if you are playing him in team modes. Next up is going to be Blast Energy Field. You're going to set up an area like this, and then whoever runs inside of it or gets hit by it will take damage or get some movement speed as well. Now, if you're an ally who runs through this, you're going to gain a little bit of movement speed as you run in the direction, but enemies that get hit by it will just take damage. Now, after you fire this, you're going to go into a form called Overcharge, in which your Q charge speed is going to be reduced by a massive amount for the duration that you are overcharged. So overall, I kind of talked about this in the last video as well, but Theodore is one of those characters that plays very interestingly and interacts well with other characters. So overall, it might not be the wind wall that all of us were really anticipating when it comes to his shield, but still a very cool character regardless, and I'm super excited to see what his what his utility in team modes in general is going to be like. Alongside the release of Theodore, we're going to have one additional cosmetic coming through, and it's going to be for Irem. It will be the Fluffy Snowball Irem skin coming in 0.75. And of course, the splash art already looking super cute. In-game is going to also be very cute in my personal opinion as well. So if you're interested, of course, pick this skin up. It is a rare skin, so it's going to be somewhere in the 1400 range. If you haven't bought the season pack already, you will have to buy it yourself. If you've already picked up the season pack, then you will be getting alongside it with this patch on the 10th. Last but not least, a very important part of the patch that for some reason Nimble Neuron decided to put at the very end of the patch notes. We are finally getting our game engine updated to Unity 2021 compared to Unity 2019. Now, this has been something that a lot of Eternal Return players have been looking forward to for a very long time, because with the update to the new engine, we should be seeing a lot of optimization coming through. But of course, because this engine update is going to be so very new in 0.75, I kind of hope that all the players are going to give a little bit of leeway to Nimble Neuron while they kind of navigate whether or not the update towards the game engine is going to be the best as it could be. In this patch, I'm pretty sure it won't be. Let's just give them a little bit of time before they can fully optimize this engine and make sure that it is bug-free while we get the best out of the engine Unity 2021. Overall, patch 0.75, in my opinion, is a very good direction that Nimble Neuron is taking for the game. A big complaint that I've had for a very long time, especially kind of during the patch 50s into the 60s, early 70s, is the fact that I thought that Nimble Neuron kind of lost their direction in regards to how they wanted to take the game. But we've seen a lot more focus in regards to making sure that characters are balanced for the game mechanics that the developers are adding into the game. For example, in Season 8, of course, the battle zones. And also, they're genuinely kind of hunkering down on the fact that a lot of characters, as well as their main game mode, wants to be teams, and you can really see that in recent characters that have been releasing, especially Theodore in 0.75. So I've been liking the ideas behind the patch notes, and in general, I think 0.75 has a lot of good changes, albeit some small changes that doesn't exactly make some sense to me. But overall, I would give this patch, I would say about a 7 out of 10, which is pretty good in my books for an Eternal Return patch notes. But in the end, what really matters is what you guys think. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about patch notes 0.75. Of course, I'll include the link to the patch notes down in the comments below as well. And if you guys have anything else that you guys want me to make videos on, please let me know, and I will try to get those videos out as fast as possible for you guys. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have fun in Season 8.